Good morning everyone. This video is for the students of class 12 subject economics. In this video we shall start a new chapter, that is chapter number 9, problem of deficient demand and excess demand, from our macroeconomics book, and this is my lecture number 1 for chapter 9. So in this video, we will discuss some essential concepts like full employment equilibrium and underemployment equilibrium, voluntary and involuntary employment, full employment and natural unemployment. And after that, we shall discuss problem of deficient demand. See, the first concept is full employment equilibrium. It refers to that situation in the economy when AS is equal to AD or S is equal to I, along with fuller utilization of resources, we can say human resources, so that there is no excess capacity or unemployment in the economy. In the last chapter, we read that equilibrium is struck when AD is equal to AS or saving is equal to investment. But it is not necessary that at that situation there is full employment in the economy. It is not necessary that all the resources are fully utilized. So the situation when there is equilibrium, but along with equilibrium there is fuller utilization of resources, there is no unemployment in the economy, that state or that situation is known as full employment equilibrium. Now the next one is underemployment equilibrium. It is just opposite to full employment equilibrium. It refers to that situation in the economy when AS is equal to AD or S is equal to I, but without fuller utilization of resources. Accordingly, there is unutilized capacity or excess capacity, or we can say unemployment in the economy even in a state of equilibrium. So when there is equilibrium in the economy but there is no fuller utilization of resources, that situation is known as underemployment equilibrium. The next topic is voluntary unemployment. As the name suggests, unemployment which is voluntary. Okay, it occurs when some people are not willing to work at all or are not willing to work at existing wage rate. Okay, so basically it is a situation when people choose to remain unemployed, when they do not want to do the jobs when jobs are available to them. So this is the situation of voluntary unemployment. Now the next one is involuntary unemployment. It occurs when some people are not getting work even when they are willing to work at existing wage rate. The economy fails to create enough jobs because planned output, that is AS, is lower than the potential output, full employment output, owing to lack of AD. Okay, now what happens? Involuntary unemployment refers to the situation when some people are not getting work even when they want to work at the wage rate, okay, but they are not getting work because there is lack of jobs in the economy. So we can say problem of unemployment refers to the problem of involuntary unemployment. Okay, full employment, it occurs when supply of labor is equal to demand of labor corresponding to a given wage rate, so that labor market is cleared and it is in a state of equilibrium. Okay, or we can say it is a situation when all those people who are willing to work and are able to work are getting work at a given wage rate. Now the situation of full employment doesn't mean there is zero unemployment. Okay, there always exists some degree of unemployment in the economy which is known as natural unemployment, and the minimum rate of unemployment that must always exist in the economy is called natural rate of unemployment. Now while adjusting, now why natural unemployment happens? Because of supply and demand parameters in the economy which keeps on changing. On the basis of them, there is a situation of frictional and structural unemployment in the economy. See, frictional unemployment and structural unemployment. Now, what is frictional unemployment? This is the unemployment associated with changing of jobs in dynamic economy. So, whenever we change our jobs for a short period of time, we do not have job, okay, but we are willing to work and we are able to work, so that causes frictional unemployment. It arises due to immobility of labor, shortage of raw material, lack of information regarding opportunities of employment, shortage of power, wear and tear of machines, tendency of workers to move from one job to other. Okay, so whenever there is a short unemployment in the economy due to many reasons, that is known as frictional unemployment. Now, second one is structural unemployment. This is the unemployment that results from the long-term decline of certain industries. It is associated with the structural changes in the economy due to these reasons. When other factors of production other than labor are in short supply, okay, if there is lack of something, okay, but there is labor, in that situation labor wants to work but can't work, that is structural unemployment. When laborers lack expertise for new emerging industries, and when there is change in production technique, okay. Now we shall discuss problem of deficient demand. In problem of deficient demand, we shall discuss concept of deficient demand, what is it, measurement of deficient demand, diagrammatic illustration, how can we measure deficient demand, what are the causes of deficient demand, and what are consequences of deficient demand. Okay. Now see the concept of deficient demand. What does deficient demand means? Means demand is said to be deficient when it is lower than what is required for the fuller utilization of resources. Okay, it is a situation when our demand is less than the desired demand which is to be obtained, so that there can be fuller utilization of resources in the economy. So it is a situation of underemployment equilibrium. It refers to a situation when aggregate demand is short of aggregate supply, okay, corresponding to full employment in the economy. Now AD is less than AS corresponding to full employment. See through diagram. See, aggregate demand is shown on y-axis, income is shown on x-axis. Okay, this ADF shows AD, okay, aggregate demand corresponding to full employment. Okay, this line of AD curve shows full employment AD. Okay, and ADP shows AD corresponding to underemployment in the economy. And this EF is the vertical difference between ADF and ADP. It measures the extent to which there is deficient demand. Okay. Now, if the desired AD is ADP, then equilibrium is struck at this point. Okay, if desired AD is ADP, then equilibrium is struck at this point. This is the point of underemployment equilibrium. Why? Because at this point our AD is denoting underemployment in the economy. Okay, and if the AD is this ADF, the point E shows equilibrium with full employment. Okay, so the gap between this vertical difference between these two graphs ADF and ADP is deficient demand. Okay, so we observe that ADF line shows required level of AD for full employment. Okay, this line shows that we required this much AD so that there is full employment in the economy. And ADP line shows AD, planned AD, which is lower than full employment. So the vertical difference between ADF and ADP is EF, which is deficient demand. Okay. Now the question arises, what are the causes of deficient demand? Okay. Now basically for learning purpose, whatever are the components of AD, okay, that we read in chapter number 7, just remember them, and in context to them we will read the causes of deficient demand. Okay. In a two-sector closed economy, deficiency of AD occurs largely due to two factors. See, the first is reduction in private consumption expenditure. Now, as we read that, C is very important component of AD. Okay, we read that consumption expenditure and investment expenditure, these both are components of AD. If they will reduce, then automatically our aggregate demand will also reduce. Okay, see, private consumption expenditure is an important component of AD. Reduction in private consumption expenditure causes a serious deficiency in AD. Okay. Now, private consumption expenditure may reduce due to several reasons. Okay. And one of the most important reason is reduction in MPC. Okay. When there is reduction in propensity to consume or there is increase in propensity to save, okay, our consumption expenditure would also reduce, because I told you that MPC is that factor that measures how much we will spend on consumption expenditure. So if our MPC would reduce, that means our consumption expenditure would also reduce. The next cause of deficient demand is reduction in private investment expenditure. Now, as I told you that it is also an important component of AD. If it will reduce, that means AD will also reduce. See, private investment expenditure is the other component of AD. It may reduce in the situation of poor business expectations. It has happened in all market economies of the world in years 2015 to 16. Okay. Now, in four sector open economy, where all the sectors of the economy play a role, the following factors may contribute to the deficiency of AD. The first factor is reduction in government expenditure. Okay, whenever government reduce its expenditure on consumption and investment, the AD will also reduce. See, a government may cut its consumption expenditure or investment expenditure. This may be because of budgetary constraints of the government, okay, because of its own reasons. A cut in government consumption expenditure or investment expenditure leads to a cut in AD, okay. The next one is decline in exports. Now, as we read in 7th chapter that exports is also a very important component of AD. It is a positive component, okay. If there is increase in exports, that means our demand will also increase. Now, we know exports are an important component of AD. A fall in exports implies a fall in expenditure on the domestically produced goods and services, okay, which will lead to a fall in AD. Rise in imports. Imports means when we purchase goods from international market rather than domestic market. And why do we do so? Because international prices are lower than domestic prices. Now, when we will purchase from international market and we will not purchase from domestic market, that means income of people of our country would reduce. Income would reduce, that means investment would reduce, consumption expenditure would reduce, that will lead to fall in AD. Okay, see. Imports may rise when international prices are lower than domestic prices. Now, imports are a negative component of AD. Accordingly, rise in imports lead to fall in AD. Okay. Next one is increase in tax rate. Increase in tax rates leaves lesser disposable income with the people. It reduces their capacity to spend. Disposable income means lower level of AD even when there is propensity to spend remains the same. Now what happened when government increases tax rates? Okay, now due to increase in tax rates, people have to pay tax. Now people will have less money with them. If they will have less money with them, that means their capacity to spend will also reduce, which automatically will lead to reduction in AD. Okay, so we can say that deficiency of demand is a situation when planned AD is lower than its full employment level. It is indicated by a downward shift in AD function. Whatever AD function is there, it is indicated by a downward shift in AD function. The possible reasons are reduction in consumption expenditure, reduction in investment expenditure, reduction in government expenditure, reduction in exports, reduction in imports, and increase in taxation. Okay. Now have a look on consequences of deficient demand. Means if demand, there would be deficient demand, then what would happen in the economy? The first one is underemployment equilibrium. Okay, owing to deficiency of AD, producers are not able to fully utilize their resources. Means if there is deficient demand in the economy, that means producers will not be able to fully utilize their resources or producing according to their production capacity. Means planned output remains less than the potential output. Okay, accordingly underemployment equilibrium is struck in the economy. Now see, aggregate demand is shown on y-axis, income is shown on x-axis. Okay, this curve, this line shows y is equal to as, income is equal to aggregate supply. Okay, ADF shows aggregate demand along with fuller utilization of resources, that is full employment, and this is ADP, that is aggregate demand with planned aggregate demand without fuller utilization of resources. Okay, so the point Q is the point of equilibrium where AS is equal to AD but without fuller utilization of resources, so it is the point of underemployment equilibrium, and ON is the output corresponding to underemployment equilibrium. Okay, or we can say underemployment equilibrium GDP. Now E is the equilibrium point where AS is equal to ADF. Okay, AD along with fuller utilization of resources. So OM is the output corresponding to full employment, or we can say full employment equilibrium GDP. Okay, and this vertical difference between E and F is known as deficient demand. Okay, so we observe that deficient demand is EF, vertical difference. Because of deficiency of demand, equilibrium is struck at point Q where ADP line intersects 45-degree AS line. This is underemployment equilibrium. Now equilibrium GDP corresponding to underemployment equilibrium is equal to ON. ON is smaller than OM. What is ON? That is underemployment equilibrium GDP, and OM is full employment equilibrium GDP. Okay, means output during or corresponding to underemployment equilibrium is less in comparison to output when there is full employment equilibrium. Okay. Now see, the next consequence is deflationary gap. What happens if aggregate demand is less? That means there is underemployment. Okay, if there is deficient demand, that means there is underemployment in the economy, which means income of people is less. People will invest less. If they will invest less, that means there would be low output. Low output means less income. Less income would again lead to low demand. So this circle will go on. Okay, and this would create deflationary spiral. See, deficiency of demand creates deflationary gap in the economy. It is a situation when lack of demand leads to deflationary pressure in the economy. Inducement to invest is hurt. Low investment leads to low output. Okay, if we will do less investment, that means there would be less output. implying low income. Now if output would be less, that means income would also be less. Income would be less, then there would be low demand. Once again, the economy starts slipping into deflationary spiral, or we can say low level equilibrium trap. Means there would be equilibrium but at low level of employment. Okay. Now how will you measure this deflationary gap? The vertical difference, that is EF, that is known as deficient demand, is equal to deflationary gap. Okay. Now see, the third consequence is undesired stocks. Okay, this we have already read that if AD would be less than AS, okay, aggregate demand would be less than aggregate supply, then producers will not be able to sell their complete stock. Okay, some stock will be left with them, and to clear their stock, what would they do? They would reduce the prices, okay, and they will plan a cut in production. Now again there would be reduction in prices, that means their income would be less. Income would be less, then consumption expenditure and investment expenditure would be less. If that would be less, that means deficient demand will be there. So basically what happens in a situation of low AD, producers are not able to sell all that they plan to sell. Accordingly, undesired stocks tend to pile up. For clearance of undesired stocks, they will plan fall in prices and fall in planned output. And these both factors contribute to deflationary spiral in the economy. And the last consequence is loss of profit. Okay, this is obvious that if producers are reducing their prices and they are planning a cut in their production, that means there would be a loss. Deficiency of AD causes loss of profits. This happens because producers are not able to clear their stock, and undesired stocks lead to price crash. Okay. So this was problem of deficit demand when AD is less than AS. Okay. Now your homework is that you have to read page number 255 to 262 of chapter number 9, problem of deficit demand and excess demand from macroeconomics. And on the basis of your reading, you have to do back exercise questions.